The rain hit the asphalt parade ground like falling bullets. Rows of new recruits stood frozen at attention under the gray morning sky at Fort Liberty, North Carolina, boots soaked, uniforms drenched, faces tense. Drill Sergeant Cole walked slowly in front of them like a predator studying weak prey. "No one here is special," he barked. "I don't care where you came from. In this place, weakness gets exposed, loud mouths get crushed, and quitters go home." His sharp eyes moved down the line. Then he stopped. A young woman stood perfectly still in the third row. Private Alina Reyes. 5'6", lean build, dark hair tied tight beneath her patrol cap, calm eyes, no nervous shifting, no fear on her face. That alone annoyed him. "Reyes," Cole snapped, "you deaf?" "No, Drill Sergeant." "Then why do you look comfortable?" "Because I came here prepared, Drill Sergeant." A few recruits quietly smirked. Cole stepped closer. "You think preparation matters here?" "No, Drill Sergeant." "Then why say it?" "Because you asked." The line instantly went silent. Several recruits looked at Alina with disbelief. Nobody talked to Cole like that on day one. Cole's jaw tightened. "Interesting," he muttered. "Very interesting." He leaned close enough for her to smell coffee on his breath. "We'll see how prepared you are after this place breaks you." "Yes, Drill Sergeant." Still calm. Still emotionless. That irritated him even more. "Drop and give me 50. Alina immediately hit the wet pavement and started push-ups. 1. The rain splashed beneath her hands. 2. The recruits watched carefully. 3. No hesitation. No shaking arms. No complaints. Cole crouched beside her. "You trying to impress someone?" "No, Drill Sergeant." "Then why aren't you struggling?" "Because 50 isn't difficult, Drill Sergeant." A few recruits accidentally laughed. "Big mistake." Cole exploded. "Everybody down." The entire platoon collapsed into mud for push-ups. The first morning of training had officially begun. And before sunrise even ended, most of the recruits already hated Alina Reyes. By the end of week 1, Fort Liberty had become a nightmare. Sleep deprivation, obstacle courses, weapon drills, endless running, screaming, punishment, pressure. Every recruit looked exhausted. Except Alina. She never bragged, never complained, never joined conversations in the barracks. While others argued, joked, or collapsed into bed, Alina quietly cleaned her rifle, folded her uniforms with perfect precision, and studied training manuals under dim lights. Nobody understood her. That made people suspicious, especially Private Logan Mercer. Mercer was loud, muscular, and naturally athletic. Back home in Texas, he'd been a football star, the kind of guy who expected respect the second he entered a room. But here, people had started noticing Alina instead. Not because she talked, because she performed. Fastest obstacle times, best shooting accuracy, sharpest memory during tactical exercises. And somehow, she did everything without showing emotion. Mercer hated that. One evening after lights out, several recruits gathered quietly in the barracks. "She's weird," one whispered. "No kidding. She acts like a robot." Mercer leaned against his bunk. "You know what I think," he said. "I think she's trying too hard." A recruit frowned. "To do what?" "To prove girls belong here." A few nodded. Another recruit glanced toward Alina's bunk across the room. "She never even reacts to anything." Mercer smirked. "Everybody reacts eventually." At that exact moment, Alina entered the barracks carrying folded laundry. Conversation stopped instantly. She walked past everyone without a word. Mercer called out, "Hey, Rays." She stopped. "What? You ever smile?" "Yes." "When?" "When something is funny." A few recruits chuckled. Mercer's smirk faded slightly. "You think you're better than us?" "No." "Then why act like you don't need anyone?" Elena looked at him calmly. "Because needing approval gets soldiers killed." The room went dead silent. Mercer stared at her. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means focus on training." Then she walked away. No anger. No attitude. Just cold honesty. And somehow, that made Mercer feel smaller than if she had insulted him directly. The next morning began at 4:30 a.m. The platoon assembled near the combat endurance course before sunrise. Massive wooden walls, rope climbs, mud trenches, barbed wire crawls. A brutal 2-mile route designed to destroy confidence. Drill Sergeant Cole stood before them. "Today," he shouted, "you learn what failure feels like." He pointed toward the course. "Move." The recruits exploded forward. Mercer sprinted ahead aggressively, determined to dominate. Elena stayed near the middle. Steady pace. Controlled breathing. No wasted movement. One by one, recruits started struggling. People slipped from ropes. Hit the mud. Lost stamina. But Elena moved through obstacles like she had practiced them for years. At the 6-foot wall, Mercer reached the top first. He turned with a grin. Then froze. Elena had already cleared the wall beside him. Without struggle. Without even looking at him. Mercer jumped down harder than necessary. "You got lucky." Elena kept running. At the rope climb, she passed 2 recruits stuck halfway up. At the trench crawl, she moved low and fast while others panicked under live machine gun fire overhead. Then came the final obstacle. The 12-foot vertical cargo net. Most recruits were exhausted by then. Mercer attacked the net aggressively, muscles burning. Halfway up, his boot slipped. He slammed hard into the ropes. The impact stunned him. Below, recruits rushed around him. "Move," instructors screamed. Mercer tried climbing again. His arms trembled. Then suddenly, a boot stepped beside his shoulder. "Elena." She climbed upward quickly and paused beside him. For 1 second, Mercer expected mockery. Instead, she said quietly, "Use your legs more than your arms." Then she kept climbing. Mercer stared upward in shock. A few seconds later, Elena reached the top. The instructors checked stopwatches. One of them raised his eyebrows. "Damn." Another shook his head. "She just beat the company record." The word spread instantly. Even exhausted recruits looked up. Company record. Mercer finally reached the top 30 seconds later. Breathing heavily. Humiliated. Below the obstacle, Drill Sergeant Cole stared at Elena with narrowed eyes. Something about her wasn't normal. No recruit adapted this fast. No recruit stayed this calm under pressure. And no recruit shattered records during week 1. Unless they had a past. That night, Cole opened Elena's personnel file inside his office. Most of it looked ordinary. Born in Arizona. No criminal history. Excellent physical evaluations. But one detail caught his attention. Father Gabriel Reyes deceased. Former U.S. Army Ranger. Killed in action overseas. Cole leaned back slowly. So that explained the discipline. But something still felt off. There were gaps in her background. Periods with almost no information. No sports history. No social media. No detailed academic notes. It was as if someone had intentionally erased parts of her life. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Enter. Captain Wallace stepped inside. You reviewing recruits? Cole nodded. Raise. Wallace chuckled softly. The quiet one. She broke the endurance course record. Wallace paused. Already. Cole slid the file across the desk. She's hiding something. Wallace skimmed through the papers. Maybe she's just motivated. No, Cole said firmly. Motivated recruits brag, they seek attention, she avoids it. Wallace looked thoughtful. You think military family training? Cole shook his head slowly. Something more. 3 days later, the platoon began rifle qualification. The atmosphere was tense. Shooting scores mattered. Bad scores followed recruits for the rest of training. At the firing range, instructors handed out M4 carbines while recruits prepared nervously. Mercer glanced sideways at Alina. Still calm. Of course. Today, the range instructor shouted, we see who can actually shoot. Targets appeared in the distance. Lane 1 fire. Gunshots cracked across the range. One by one, recruits completed their turns. Average scores. Some terrible. A few decent. Mercer performed well enough to impress people. 36 out of 40. He grinned proudly while walking back. Then Alina stepped into position. The range instructor checked her weapon. You ever fired before? Yes. How much? Enough. The instructor smirked. Confident. Alina said nothing. Shooter ready. Yes. Fire. The first shot echoed sharply. Dead center. Then another. Center. Another. Center. The instructor's expression changed. Shots continued. Precise. Controlled. No wasted movement. No panic. No hesitation. Even experienced instructors began watching closely. By shot 20, whispers started behind the line. She hasn't missed. Impossible. Mercer frowned. The final shot rang out. Silence followed. The range officer lowered binoculars slowly. What the hell? Another instructor grabbed the score sheet, then looked up in disbelief. Perfect score. The platoon erupted into murmurs. Perfect. Not one missed shot. Drill Sergeant Cole stared hard at Alina. How long did your father train you? Alina unloaded her weapon carefully. He didn't. Cole stepped closer. Then where'd you learn? She met his eyes. Life. That answer stayed in Cole's head long after training ended. The tension in the barracks grew worse every day. Some recruits respected Alina. Others resented her. Mercer belonged to the second group. Late one evening during cleaning duty, he confronted her directly. You enjoy making everyone look bad. Alina continued, wiping down her rifle. No. Then stop acting perfect. I'm not perfect. Mercer laughed bitterly. You beat records, shoot perfectly. Never get tired, never panic. You expect people not to hate that. Alina looked at him calmly. You think this is competition? It is. No, she said quietly. Competition ends after graduation. War doesn't. That irritated him even more. You always talk like some hardened soldier. Alina paused briefly, then returned to cleaning. Mercer stepped closer. You know what your problem is? No. You think silence makes you strong. Finally, Alina looked directly at him. No, she said softly, pain does. For the first time since meeting her, Mercer had no response, because for 1 second he saw something inside her eyes. Not arrogance, not pride. Pain, real pain, deep enough to bury a person alive. And before he could ask anything else, the emergency alarm suddenly blared across the barracks. Red lights flashed. Instructors shouted outside. All recruits outside now. Everyone scrambled into formation. Rain poured heavily again as trucks rolled into the training yard. Captain Wallace stepped forward with a grim expression. Listen carefully, he announced. Tomorrow begins the Crucible exercise. The platoon exchanged nervous looks. Everyone had heard stories about the Crucible. 3 days. Almost no sleep. Extreme weather. Live tactical scenarios. Exhaustion designed to break recruits mentally and physically. Wallace's eyes hardened. Some of you will quit. Silence. Some of you will fail. More silence. And some of you will discover who you really are. Lightning flashed across the sky behind him. Then he pointed toward the recruits. Get rest while you can. As everyone began moving back inside, Mercer noticed Alina standing perfectly still in the rain. Not afraid. Not nervous. Just watching the dark sky. Like she already knew something terrible was coming. And somewhere deep inside, for the very first time, Mercer realized he might have completely misunderstood her. But by the time the Crucible ended, the entire base would understand exactly who Alina Reyes really was. And none of them were ready for it. The wind howled across Fort Liberty before sunrise. Dark clouds covered the sky as military trucks lined up beside the training grounds. Rainwater dripped from steel bumpers. Instructors moved through the area with hard expressions, checking gear and shouting orders. The Crucible had begun. Every recruit stood in formation, wearing heavy rucksacks loaded with nearly 50 pounds of equipment. Exhaustion already sat on their faces. Fear sat deeper. Captain Wallace walked slowly down the line. For the next 72 hours, he announced, you will be pushed beyond your limits. Hunger, fatigue, pressure, pain, you will experience all of it. His eyes moved across the platoon. This exercise is designed to reveal weakness. Then his gaze stopped briefly on Alina Reyes. And weakness always reveals itself eventually. Alina stood motionless. Rain rolled down her face, but she didn't blink. Move out, Wallace roared. The platoon immediately began the 12-mile forced march into the forest training zone. Heavy boots pounded the wet dirt road. Some recruits started struggling within the first mile. Others complained under their breath. Mercer walked several feet ahead of Alina, determined not to fall behind her again. But no matter how difficult the pace became, she stayed steady. No heavy breathing. No complaints. No signs of exhaustion. Just silence. And somehow, that silence unnerved people more than yelling ever could. By the 4th mile, the weather turned brutal. Rain slammed through the trees sideways as mud swallowed boots whole. One recruit slipped down an embankment with a cry. Another nearly collapsed under his rucksack. Drill Sergeant Cole showed no sympathy. Keep moving. Mercer's shoulders burned under the weight. He glanced back at Alina. Still calm. Still walking like the storm didn't exist. How are you not tired? He muttered. She looked at him briefly. I am tired. You don't look it. You don't show weakness unless necessary. Mercer shook his head. You talk like you've done this before. Alina didn't answer. That answer alone was enough. Hours later, the platoon finally reached the first tactical checkpoint deep inside the forest. Tall pine trees surrounded the muddy clearing. Instructors quickly established a mock combat zone using smoke grenades, simulated explosions, and live fire exercises nearby. Captain Wallace addressed the recruits. "You are now entering hostile territory." The exhausted platoon listened carefully. "Your mission is simple. Move through enemy-controlled terrain, recover a simulated hostage, and return without casualties." One recruit whispered nervously, "Casualties." Wallace heard him immediately. "If you can't handle pressure here," he snapped, "you won't survive real combat." The platoon divided into smaller squads. Mercer ended up assigned to Alina's fire team. The second he realized it, he groaned quietly. "Perfect." Alina adjusted her rifle sling. "You'll survive." Mercer rolled his eyes. That almost sounded like a joke. "Almost." For the first time, he noticed the corner of her mouth move slightly. Not quite a smile, but close. The mission began at dusk. The forest grew darker by the minute as the squads moved carefully between trees. Branches snapped under boots. Rainwater dripped constantly from leaves overhead. Every recruit stayed tense, especially after the first simulated gunfire erupted nearby. Bang, bang, bang. Several recruits panicked immediately. "Incoming!" Smoke exploded across the trail as instructors screamed from hidden positions. Mercer dropped behind a fallen log beside Alina. "What now?" She scanned the terrain quickly. "Machine gun position," she said calmly. "How can you tell?" "The angle of fire." Mercer blinked. Before he could respond, Alina pointed toward dense brush 30 yards ahead. "There." A hidden instructor, wearing camouflage, briefly shifted position. Mercer's eyes widened. "How did you even see that?" Alina ignored the question. "We flank left." "You sure?" "Yes." Mercer hesitated only a second before following her. Together they crawled through mud while simulated gunfire cracked overhead. Several other recruits froze under pressure. One started hyperventilating. Another shouted conflicting directions. Chaos spread quickly, but Alina stayed focused. Every movement precise. Every decision immediate. It felt less like training and more like instinct. They finally reached the enemy position unnoticed. Alina raised her hand. 3 fingers. 2. 1. She exploded upward. "Move." Mercer rushed beside her. The instructors, acting as enemy combatants, looked genuinely surprised when Alina's squad overwhelmed the position so quickly. "Exercise hold," one instructor shouted. Smoke drifted through the trees. Drill Sergeant Cole emerged from behind cover, staring directly at Alina. "You've done room-clearing tactics before." "No, Drill Sergeant." "You expect me to believe that?" "Yes, Drill Sergeant." Cole stepped closer. "You move like infantry." Alina's expression didn't change. "I move carefully." Cole studied her for another second. Then he walked away without another word. But his suspicion kept growing. That night the platoon stopped briefly near a freezing riverbank. No tents. No fire. Just cold rain and exhaustion. Recruits sat silently eating military rations while trying not to fall asleep. Mercer leaned beside a tree, rubbing sore shoulders. Across from him, Alina quietly cleaned mud from her rifle. "How are you still functioning?" he asked. "Training." "No normal person trains like this." Alina remained silent. Mercer sighed. "You know, people might actually like you if you talked more." "Why?" "Because then you'd seem human." She paused slightly at that, then asked quietly, What makes someone human? Mercer frowned. What kind of question is that? A serious one. He thought for a moment. Emotions, I guess. Fear, anger, happiness. Elena looked down at the muddy ground. Those things make people vulnerable. No, Mercer said. Those things make people real. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then distant explosions echoed through the forest again. The instructors weren't letting them rest. Not even for 10 minutes. The second day of the crucible became worse. Much worse. The recruits were sleep-deprived, soaked, starving, and mentally exhausted. That was intentional. The instructors wanted mistakes. And eventually, they got them. During a mountain navigation exercise, one recruit named Harris lost footing near a steep ridge. The wet ground collapsed beneath him. He fell hard down the slope with a scream. The platoon froze. Harris, Mercer shouted. The recruit crashed against rocks 20 feet below and stopped moving. For one horrifying second, nobody reacted. Then Elena moved. Vast. She slid down the muddy incline without hesitation. Harris, Cole barked, "Stay back until medics." Too late. Elena already reached him. The recruit groaned weakly, clutching his leg. "It's broken," he gasped. Rain poured harder as Elena quickly examined the injury. Her movements became calm, efficient. Too efficient. She stabilized his leg, using straps from her own equipment. Mercer slid down beside her. "You know medical training too. Help me lift him." That wasn't an answer. Together they carried Harris upward through mud, while instructors watched closely. Captain Wallace narrowed his eyes. "She splinted that fracture correctly," he muttered. Cole crossed his arms. "That's not beginner knowledge." Wallace looked thoughtful. "You think prior military exposure?" "No," Cole replied slowly. "I think we still don't know who she is." That evening, the recruits reached the final stage of the crucible. The urban warfare simulation. An abandoned training village sat in the middle of the forest, filled with dark buildings and narrow alleyways. Rain hammered rusted rooftops. Smoke drifted through broken windows. The setting looked disturbingly real. Captain Wallace gathered the platoon one last time. This scenario determines graduation rankings. Every exhausted recruit immediately focused. Inside this village is a simulated hostage target. Enemy forces are active. Your squad leaders will coordinate extraction under live tactical conditions. Mercer whispered under his breath. "This is insane." Elena checked her weapon. "No," she said quietly, "this is training." Wallace continued. "Failure to adapt equals mission failure." Then his voice hardened. "And mission failure gets people killed." The platoon moved into position. Darkness covered the village. Only scattered floodlights illuminated parts of the streets. Every shadow looked dangerous. Mercer stayed beside Elena as their squad advanced carefully through an alley. Gunfire suddenly erupted. Bang, bang, bang. Incoming. Recruits scattered for cover. An instructor acting as enemy opposition pinned the squad behind concrete barriers. Nobody could advance. Panic spread immediately. "We're trapped. We can't cross." Mercer looked toward Elena. "What do we do?" She studied the buildings quickly, then pointed upward. "Roof access." Mercer blinked. "You serious?" "That gunner has tunnel vision. We move above him." Without waiting, Elena sprinted toward a nearby fire escape ladder. Mercer cursed softly and followed. Rain made the metal dangerously slippery as they climbed. Below, the squad watched in disbelief. Are they insane? Elena reached the rooftop first. She crouched low and moved silently across the wet surface. Every step controlled. Mercer struggled to keep up. "How are you so good at this?" Still no answer. They reached the enemy position from above. The instructor below remained focused on the squad at street level. Alina raised her hand. 3 fingers. 2. 1. She dropped down behind the instructor with shocking speed. Clear. Mercer followed seconds later. The squad erupted forward. The simulated hostage was recovered within minutes. Mission complete. Even the instructors looked stunned. Captain Wallace lowered his binoculars slowly. "She improvised vertical flanking under pressure," he said quietly. Cole nodded grimly. "And she never hesitated." Wallace looked toward Alina, standing silently in the rain-soaked street. "She doesn't act like a recruit." "No," Cole agreed. "She acts like someone trying to survive." Later that night, the exhausted platoon returned to base. Most recruits could barely walk. Some collapsed onto benches. The second truck stopped moving. But Alina remained standing. Quiet as always. Mercer sat nearby watching her. "You know," he said finally, "I was wrong about you." She looked at him calmly. "About what?" "I thought you trained this hard because you wanted attention. And now, I think you trained this hard because you're afraid not to." For the first time since arriving at Fort Liberty, Alina looked genuinely affected. Not angry. Not defensive. Just still. Mercer noticed her hands tighten slightly around her canteen. Then she quietly asked, "What makes you think that?" "Because nobody pushes themselves like this unless they're running from something." Silence followed. Heavy silence. Then Alina finally spoke. "My father used to say something." Mercer listened carefully. "He said the world doesn't care if you're hurting. It only cares whether you keep moving." Mercer frowned. "That's rough." "He was Army Ranger." "That explains some things." Alina looked away toward the dark parade ground. "He died overseas when I was 13. Mercer's expression softened immediately. "I'm sorry." She nodded once. "That was the day I stopped being a child." The words hit harder than Mercer expected. Because she didn't say them emotionally. She said them like facts. Like something buried long ago. Before he could respond, a loud argument suddenly erupted near the barracks. Several recruits shouted, while instructors rushed outside. "What's happening?" Mercer stood. One terrified recruit pointed toward the woods beyond the base perimeter. "I saw someone out there." Cole stormed forward angrily. "Who?" "A man." The recruit's voice shook badly. "He was watching the barracks." The atmosphere instantly changed. Instructors exchanged serious looks. Captain Wallace grabbed a flashlight. "Everyone inside, now." Mercer looked toward Alina. For the first time since meeting her, she looked nervous. Not scared. Worried. And when Wallace mentioned security patrol searching the woods, Alina's face lost color completely. Mercer noticed immediately. "What's wrong?" She didn't answer. Instead, she stared into the darkness beyond the fence line. Like she feared someone might actually be out there. Watching. Waiting. And somehow connected to her. The storm finally stopped sometime after midnight. But Fort Liberty didn't feel calm. Floodlights scanned the tree line beyond the barracks, while military police vehicles rolled slowly across the perimeter roads. Instructors spoke in low voices. Recruits whispered nervously inside their rooms. Nobody knew whether the figure near the woods had been real. But Alina Reyes knew one thing for certain. Someone had been watching, and deep inside her chest, a feeling she hadn't experienced in years slowly returned. Fear. Real fear. The next morning began before sunrise. The platoon assembled outside despite exhaustion from the crucible. Most recruits looked half dead. Mercer rubbed tired eyes while standing beside Elena. "You sleep at all?" "No. Me neither." She stared ahead silently. Mercer noticed the dark circles beneath her eyes. For the first time since training began, she actually looked human. Drill Sergeant Cole marched toward the formation. "You survived the crucible," he barked. "Congratulations, nobody cares." A few recruits groaned quietly. Cole ignored them. Graduation is 4 days away, which means this is where weak recruits get comfortable. His eyes hardened. "That ends today." He pointed toward the training field. "Combat tournament begins in 10 minutes. The platoon exchanged nervous looks. Mercer muttered under his breath, "You've got to be kidding me." But Cole wasn't joking. The final week before graduation always included competitive elimination drills. Hand-to-hand combat, squad tactics, timed endurance challenges, pressure designed to expose weaknesses one last time. And everyone already knew who the favorite was. Elena Reyes. That made tensions worse. By mid-morning, the combat arena filled with recruits and instructors. A large circular mat sat in the center, while soldiers gathered around metal barriers to watch. Captain Wallace stepped forward holding a clipboard. "Today's evaluation is simple," he announced. "Controlled combat, technique matters more than strength." Mercer quietly smirked beside Elena. "That speech is definitely aimed at me." Elena adjusted her gloves. "You rely too much on aggression. You rely too much on sounding mysterious." For the briefest moment, she almost smiled again. Then the first match began. 2 large recruits entered the mat aggressively. The fight ended quickly. Sloppy attacks. Poor balance. Too emotional. Cole looked disgusted. "I've seen toddlers fight better." One by one, recruits cycled through the tournament. Some performed well. Some embarrassed themselves completely. Then Wallace called the next name. Private Mercer. Mercer rolled his shoulders confidently and stepped forward. His opponent lasted less than a minute. Mercer's raw strength overwhelmed him fast. Several recruits cheered. Mercer grinned proudly while stepping off the mat. Until Wallace spoke again. "Next match, Private Mercer versus Private Reyes." The entire arena went silent. Mercer blinked. "You serious?" Cole crossed his arms. "You got a problem with that?" Mercer looked toward Elena. She walked calmly toward the mat without saying a word. No nervousness. No emotion. That somehow made the situation worse. Mercer exhaled slowly. "Great." The recruits crowded closer around the arena. Everyone wanted to see this. The strongest male recruit versus the silent girl who kept humiliating records. Wallace raised a hand. "Controlled engagement only. No intentional injuries." Mercer nodded. Elena nodded once. "Begin." Mercer moved first. Vast. Aggressive. Exactly as expected. He lunged forward, trying to overpower her immediately. But Elena sidestepped smoothly. Too smoothly. Mercer stumbled past her. The crowd reacted instantly. "Oh." Mercer recovered quickly and attacked again. Punch. Blocked. Kick. Dodged. Every movement Elena made looked efficient instead of flashy. Minimal effort. Maximum control. That frustrated Mercer immediately. You gonna fight back or just dance around? You're angry, Alina replied calmly. No kidding. He charged harder. Big mistake. The second Mercer overcommitted. Alina moved. Fast. She trapped his arm, shifted her weight, and flipped him onto the mat with shocking precision. The crowd exploded. Mercer hit hard enough to lose breath instantly. What the hell? Even instructors looked surprised. Cole narrowed his eyes sharply. That wasn't beginner-level combat training. Not even close. Mercer jumped back up angrily. You think that was luck? No. That single answer made him even angrier. He attacked again. But this time, Alina countered immediately. Strike. Pivot. Sweep. Mercer crashed down again. The arena fell completely silent. Nobody had ever handled Mercer that easily before. Nobody. Mercer stared upward in disbelief, while Alina stepped back calmly. Not arrogant. Not mocking. Just waiting. Wallace finally ended the match. Winner, Private Rays. Mercer slowly stood, breathing hard. His pride wanted to hate her. But another part of him, the honest part, understood something now. Alina wasn't talented. She was trained. Seriously trained. And that realization raised terrifying questions. After the tournament, Captain Wallace called Alina into his office. The room smelled faintly of coffee and paperwork. Cole stood near the window, waiting silently. Alina entered and stopped at attention. You wanted to see me, sir. Wallace studied her carefully. At ease. She relaxed slightly. Cole wasted no time. Where'd you learn close-quarters combat? Alina's expression stayed neutral. My father taught me basics. Basics, Cole repeated sharply. You executed advanced counter techniques. Silence. Wallace leaned forward. Alina, we've trained thousands of recruits. What you demonstrated today isn't normal. She said nothing. Cole stepped closer. You hiding prior military experience. No, drill sergeant. Private security training. No. Law enforcement. No. Cole's patience began thinning. Then explain it. Finally, Alina looked directly at him. My father believed weakness gets people killed. Cole crossed his arms. So he trained you like a soldier. Yes. How long? A brief pause. Since childhood. The room went quiet. Wallace exchanged a glance with Cole. That explained discipline. Maybe even shooting. But not everything. Not the tactical instincts. Not the emotional control. Not the way she reacted under pressure. Cole spoke carefully. Your father teach you survival training too. Alina hesitated. Too long. That tiny hesitation changed everything. Cole noticed immediately. So he did. She looked away slightly. Wallace leaned back slowly. What exactly did your father prepare you for? For the first time, Alina didn't have an answer. Or maybe she had one she refused to say. That evening, Mercer found Alina alone near the obstacle course. Sunset painted the sky orange, while empty training fields stretched quietly around them. She sat on a wooden bench cleaning mud from her boots. Mercer approached carefully. You embarrassed me today. You attacked emotionally. That's your response. It's the truth. Mercer shook his head with a small laugh. You know what's annoying? What? You're almost never wrong. She continued cleaning silently. Mercer sat beside her. After a moment he asked quietly, Who trained you? Alina's hand stopped moving. My father. That's not the whole story. Silence. Mercer looked out across the empty field. You don't have to tell me everything, he said, but something's clearly eating you alive. For several seconds, only the wind answered. Then Alina finally spoke softly. When I was 13, two men came to our house after my father died. Mercer turned toward her immediately. They said they served with him. Her voice remained calm. Too calm. They asked questions about documents he supposedly left behind. What documents? I don't know. Mercer frowned. What happened? Alina stared ahead. My father taught me something before deployment. What? If strangers ever came looking for him, run. A cold feeling crept into Mercer's chest. So you ran. She nodded once. My mother thought I was overreacting. What about those men? Alina's eyes darkened slightly. They came back. Mercer's stomach tightened. And a long silence followed. Then she quietly said, My mother died 2 weeks later. The words hit like a punch. Mercer stared at her. What? Officially, it was a robbery. But you don't believe that. No. The wind moved through the empty field. Mercer suddenly understood something terrifying. Alina hadn't joined the army for pride, or patriotism, or attention. She joined because she'd spent years preparing for war long before wearing a uniform. The next day, graduation rehearsals began. Families would arrive soon. Ceremonial uniforms were issued. The atmosphere around base slowly shifted from brutal training toward celebration. Most recruits relaxed for the first time in weeks. But Alina became more tense with every passing hour. Mercer noticed immediately. You okay? Yes. That's not true. She adjusted her gloves silently. You keep scanning every crowd, Mercer said quietly, like you expect someone to appear. Alina looked away. Before she could answer, a loud voice interrupted nearby. Mail call. Several recruits hurried excitedly toward the barracks entrance where packages and letters waited. Mercer grabbed a small box from his family. Others laughed while reading letters from home. But Alina froze completely. A military clerk held one final envelope. Private Alina Reyes. The entire room noticed her reaction instantly. Slowly, she stepped forward and took the envelope. No return address. No stamp. Just her name. Written neatly. Mercer saw her hands tighten slightly. You all right? She didn't answer. Instead, she opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a single photograph. The color drained from her face instantly. Mercer caught a glimpse before she lowered it. It showed Alina entering the base 3 weeks earlier. Someone had taken the picture secretly from a distance. On the back, written in black ink, were 5 words. Your father took something important. Mercer's blood ran cold. Alina. She immediately folded the photo and shoved it into her pocket. But it was too late. Fear had finally broken through her mask. Real fear. That night, Alina couldn't sleep. Rain tapped lightly against barracks windows while recruits snored around her. But her eyes stayed open, watching darkness, listening, thinking. The photograph changed everything, because it confirmed what she feared for years. Whoever hunted her father had found her. At 2:13 a.m., she quietly rose from bed and slipped outside. Cold air hit instantly. The base looked silent beneath pale moonlight. Alina walked toward the far edge of the training grounds alone. Then stopped. Someone stood near the fence line. A man. Tall. Motionless. Watching her. Elena's pulse exploded. Who are you? The figure stepped forward slowly. Not military. Civilian clothes. Gray jacket. Older man. Maybe late 50s. You shouldn't have joined the army, he said calmly. Elena immediately stepped backward. How did you get on base? That's not important. Her breathing sharpened. What do you want? The man studied her carefully. You look exactly like Gabriel. Hearing her father's name from a stranger felt like ice through her veins. You knew him? Yes. Who are you? The man glanced around the empty field. Someone trying to keep you alive. Elena didn't believe him for 1 second. You sent the photograph. Yes. Why? Because others are coming. The wind moved softly across the fence. Elena's instinct screamed danger. What did my father take? The man hesitated, then quietly answered. Evidence. Her heartbeat pounded harder. Evidence of what? Before he could answer, a flashlight beam suddenly cut across the field. Hey, who's out there? Military police. The older man reacted instantly. Listen carefully, he said fast. Your father died protecting something dangerous. If they realize you know anything. Who? But the man already moved backward into darkness. Wait. He disappeared beyond the trees seconds before military police arrived. Elena, one officer called. What are you doing out here? She stared into the woods, breathing hard. The stranger was gone, but his warning remained. Others are coming. And somehow, deep down, Elena knew graduation day was about to become something far more dangerous than a ceremony. The morning of graduation arrived too calmly, too clean, too perfect. A bright sun hung over Fort Liberty, washing the parade ground in gold light as if nothing dangerous had ever happened there. Rows of chairs were set up for families. Cameras were positioned near the stage. Military flags moved gently in the breeze. To most people, it looked like a celebration. To Elena Reyes, it looked like a countdown. She stood inside the barracks mirror in full dress uniform. Everything pressed, perfect, sharp. But her hands weren't steady. Behind her, Mercer adjusted his tie awkwardly. You look like you're going to a funeral, he said, half joking. Elena didn't respond. Mercer frowned. Hey, about last night. Not now, she interrupted softly. That alone made him stop. Because Elena never interrupted people unless something mattered. Outside, the base was already filling with families. Laughter, music, handshakes. Parents hugging sons and daughters who had survived training. Drill Sergeant Cole stood near the stage with Captain Wallace, observing the arrivals. Cole's expression was tight. You notice something off? He asked quietly. Wallace scanned the perimeter. Security's doubled. Not enough, Cole muttered. Wallace glanced at him. You still thinking about that man? Cole didn't answer immediately. I'm thinking about Reyes, he said finally, and what he knew about her father. Wallace sighed. Today is graduation. Let's not create panic. Cole's eyes stayed cold. Panic doesn't create problems, Captain. Secrets do. Inside the barracks, Elena stood alone for a moment. Mercer had gone outside. The room was quiet. Too quiet. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the photograph again. The one from the night before. Her image walking into base. Someone watching her from distance. And that message. Your father took something important. Elena traced the edge of the photo slowly. Then she flipped it over again. Nothing else. No signature. No clue. Just warning. A knock came suddenly at the door. She quickly hid the photo. Enter. A military clerk stepped in. Private Reyes, you're on in 10 minutes. Elena nodded. The clerk paused. You okay? I'm fine. He didn't look convinced. But he left anyway. Elena exhaled slowly. Then whispered to herself. No, I'm not. The graduation ceremony began at 900 hours. Families filled the stands. Music played. Officers marched in formation. Everything looked normal. But Elena noticed things others didn't. Two unfamiliar men in suits standing near the back fence. Not family. Not military. Just watching. She felt it immediately. Like cold pressure behind her eyes. Mercer followed her gaze. What is it? Nothing, she said quickly. But Mercer wasn't convinced. He leaned closer. You've been acting like someone's hunting you. Elena didn't answer. Because she knew if she said it out loud, it would become real. Captain Wallace stepped onto the stage. Today we recognize the completion of basic training. Applause. And the transformation of civilians into soldiers. More applause. Elena stood in formation with the rest of the platoon. But her focus wasn't on the ceremony. It was scanning. Every exit. Every angle. Every face. Then she saw it. One of the men near the fence lifted a hand slightly. Not waving. Signaling. To someone else. Elena's pulse jumped. She leaned slightly toward Mercer. Stay close to me after ceremony. He blinked. Why? Just do it. Before he could respond, a sharp sound cracked through the air. Not applause. Not music. A gunshot. Everything froze for half a second. Then chaos exploded. STREMS. People ducked. Cameras fell. Soldiers shouted. DOWN, DOWN. Elena immediately grabbed Mercer and pulled him behind the stage platform. Sniper, Mercer shouted. No, Elena said sharply. Distraction. Another shot rang out, this time hitting a metal pole near the stage. Panic spread through the crowd. Security forces rushed in. Drill Sergeant Cole barked orders. Lock down the perimeter. Captain Wallace grabbed a radio. Sniper position, North Ridge, move. But Elena wasn't looking at the ridge. She was looking at the fence. The two men in suits were gone. That's when she understood. The gunshot wasn't the threat. It was the signal. Mercer, she said quickly. What? Stay here. Where are you going? But she was already moving. Elena slipped through the chaos, staying low behind barriers. Military police were focused on crowd control. No one noticed her crossing the field. She reached the side gate. Locked. She didn't hesitate. Climbed. Dropped over. Ran. Mercer saw her disappear. Damn it, he muttered. Then he followed. Outside the perimeter fence, Elena ran toward the tree line. Her boots hit dirt fast. Breathing controlled. Instinct guiding her. She heard movement ahead. Two figures. Running. She sprinted faster. Stop. They didn't. She tackled the first one hard into the ground. The second turned. But Mercer arrived seconds later, grabbing him. Both men struggled. But Elena pinned the first one instantly. Who sent you? She demanded. No answer. She tightened her grip. I said, who sent you? The man laughed. You already know. That stopped her. Mercer looked confused. Elena. She stared at the man. "Tell me what you know about my father." The man smiled slightly. "He didn't die in combat." Alina's grip tightened. "What did you say?" "He was executed." Silence. Even Mercer froze. The forest felt suddenly colder. Alina's voice dropped. "Liar." But the man continued. "He found something your government didn't want exposed, so they erased him." Mercer stepped forward. "That's insane." The man looked at Mercer. "Is it?" Then he turned back to Alina. "You've been followed since you arrived here. Graduation wasn't celebration, it was extraction." Alina's heart pounded harder. "Extraction of what?" The man smiled faintly. "You." Before she could react, a sharp sound echoed behind them. A stun grenade. Flash. Everything white. When Alina regained vision, everything was chaos again. Military units had entered the forest. The captured men were gone. So were the unknown figures from earlier. Mercer grabbed her arm. "What the hell is happening?" Alina stared at the ground. Her breathing was uneven for the first time. "They're cleaning it up," she said quietly. "Who is they?" She looked at him, and for the first time in all 4 parts, she looked truly exhausted. "People who killed my father." Back at the ceremony grounds, Captain Wallace stood with Drill Sergeant Cole. "They breached perimeter security twice," Wallace said angrily. "How is that possible on graduation day?" Cole didn't respond immediately. His eyes were locked on the empty field where Alina had disappeared. "She's gone," Wallace added. Cole finally spoke. "No," he said quietly, "she's not gone." Wallace frowned. "What do you mean?" Cole turned slowly. "Rays didn't run. She chased." Deep in the forest, Alina and Mercer regrouped under heavy tension. Military searchlights scanned nearby areas. Helicopters began circling. Mercer paced anxiously. "Okay, start explaining right now." Alina sat on a fallen log. Her hands were shaking slightly. She hated that. She hated that he could see it. "My father wasn't just a ranger," she said finally. Mercer listened carefully. "He was part of a classified intelligence unit. He discovered illegal operations overseas." Mercer's eyes widened slightly. "And he stole evidence, brought it back." She looked up at him. "That's what they want." Mercer shook his head. "So your whole life, training, enlistment, everything, it was all connected." Alina nodded slowly. "I didn't join the army for honor." Her voice lowered. "I joined because I thought I could find answers." A long silence followed. Then Mercer asked quietly, "And now?" Alina stood up slowly. "Now I know they found me first." Suddenly, radio chatter crackled nearby. "Search team moving Sector 4. Suspect sighted near tree line." Mercer grabbed his rifle tighter. "We need to move." Alina nodded. But before they could, a voice came through the trees. "Yelena." She froze. That voice. Older. Familiar. Painful. Mercer looked around. "Who is that?" Alina stepped forward slowly. "No." A figure emerged from the shadows. Military uniform. Old rank insignia. Scar across his face. Alina's breath stopped completely. "Captain Rhodes," she whispered. The man smiled faintly. "Hello, Alina." Mercer looked between them. "You know him." Alina's voice barely came out. "He was my father's commander." Rhodes stepped closer. "And now I'm here to finish what your father started." Alina's eyes hardened instantly. What did you do to him? Rhodes didn't answer directly. Instead, he said, he made a mistake trusting the system. Mercer raised his weapon slightly. Step back. Rhodes ignored him. His eyes stayed on Alina. You were never supposed to graduate today. Alina's voice turned cold. What does that mean? Rhodes smiled faintly. It means you were the plan all along. Silence dropped like a weight. Mercer whispered, Alina. But she didn't move. Because for the first time in her life, she understood the truth. Her entire military journey was never just training. It was preparation for something far bigger and far more dangerous. Rhodes raised a small device in his hand. And now, he said quietly, we end it. Alina stepped forward. No. Rhodes tilted his head. No. She clenched her fists. You don't control me anymore. A pause. Then Rhodes pressed the device. A distant explosion echoed somewhere deeper in the forest. And suddenly, the real fight began.